Story 1. Into the gray. The first time it happened, I thought I was dead. There I was lying under the hot water of my hotel room's shower. My thoughts and concerns raced through my head. I was overwhelmed by the feelings of fear and a certain peril in my future. Breathing deeply, I tried to calm my mind, silence the thoughts, and relax, mending the sounds of falling water from the shower head with the rain and thunder pouring just outside the hotel window. As the sounds started to blend, I closed my eyes and concentrated on nothing. As my mind completely cleared itself, my thoughts went silent. And it happened. The sound started to fade and my breathing slowed. The pounding of my heart seemed to cease. I opened my eyes only to see my vision tunneling into darkness, and in the moment that the blackness closed around me, I felt nothing. I feared to open my eyes, but no sooner did the thought cross my mind than I became aware of my surroundings. It is best described as a shade of gray. Though I saw the water strangely moving slowly out of the shower head, I heard nothing, and as I looked down I saw my body. It appeared to be asleep. Overcome with shock, I tried to gasp, but could not. I then noticed that I was not breathing. I didn't have to. I felt nothing. The need to blink or breath was gone, along with all other senses except that of this blurred sight I was experiencing. I considered myself dead, yet eerily accepted this fate faster than one might expect. Sick of staring down at my body in terror, I decided to move on to observe the environment around me. I moved. It took only a thought. No motion, strain, or movement of limbs. I just moved forward as my thoughts took me there. The weightlessness was strange to me. As I entered the bedroom, I saw that the once loud, vibrant, and tacky colors of the hotel's carpet were now gray. Everything translucent. The walls seemed alive, moving erratically as a television with bad reception. The complete and utter silence was becoming a disturbing void. As I moved on, I approached the door. I thought to reach out for the handle, expecting to feel the cold metal under my fingers, but nothing happened. I could not physically open the door because my physical body was still lying in the shower. I moved forward, passing through the door, though I should have expected it. I was surprised when I didn't feel anything. The only difference in moving openly and passing through that door was that as I was in the door, I moved more lethargically, slower than my few other previous movements. I started moving through the halls looking for something. I didn't know what at the time. Possibly someone else, someone alive. At this hour it was doubtful that anyone was awake, not feeling the urge to pass through someone's wall and watch them sleep. Envious of the living, I decided to move on. Outside the door of the hotel, I noticed that the cars were moving up and down the street at a crawl, almost motionless as the water from the shower. I believed my perception of time to have almost completely ceased, just as I was pondering what I would do with an eternity. Of this I caught a glimpse of a figure on the edges of my perception, a shadow moving blindingly fast. It was hard to follow, being that it blended in with the grayness of my current domain. I attempted to shout out to it, and suddenly my silence was broken, not with audible noise, but my thoughts that I attempted to put into word. They echoed loudly in my mind. The shadow stopped. Although it was at quite a distance, it seemed to have heard or felt what I had just formulated in my mind. It slowly started to approach, but then suddenly picked up speed. My mind was frightened. My thoughts were scattered. All the things I started thinking would suddenly begin ringing through my head. It was loud and overwhelming. The shadow grew closer, It was not the form of a human. It was running on what appeared to be for legs, full speed now. Every thought screaming loud in my mind at the same time the shadow was upon me. The beating of the water against my skin awoke me, screaming, flailing, gripping the sides of the bathtub to climb out. Slipping on the wet tile, I fell to the ground, frantically trying to stand, my head and heart pounding. The once normal bathroom light now seemed unbearably blinding. Stumbling to the bed, I climbed in, trembling. Only a few things were sure. I was alive. The reality of what just happened allowed me to dismiss the possibility of dreaming, and I was not the only thing within the gray. Story 2. Dancing Dead. Jake shouldn't be outside tonight, let alone walk through the woods by himself. But he's just gonna drop by his friend's house real quick to pick up his phone, which he forgot there a few days ago. How much harm can that really do? A damp, blue-tinted fog silently prowls the night, meandering through the towering trees. The moon has deprived the sun of its throne in the sky, and the repetitive sound of his sneakers hitting the dirt road is the only thing accompanying him, with the soft harmonies of solitude cascading through the forest comes complete tranquility. You can really tell that there's almost no one outside right now. A different kind of smell drifts with the wine, and a different kind of air fills his lungs each time he takes a breath. The sensation of undisturbed nature is a pretty rare thing nowadays. Maybe the rumors of this night and why you should stay inside was all made up by people who wanted to enjoy this once every year. A bush rustles somewhere behind him. Jake stops in his tracks and pricks up his ears. Nothing but the distant hooting of an owl, trying not to make anything of it. He continues walking the narrow path in front of him. He only gets to take a couple of steps, though, before he hears another rustle and freezes instantly. The sound is a little closer to him this time, but when he spins around to face the bush, he sees nothing. Must be a squirrel or something, maybe a cute little fox. The bottom line is, it's nothing to worry about. Jake presses on, but the air that fills his lungs is now flavored with paranoia, which pumps out through his veins like a malicious virus. He tries to calm himself down, but when the third rustle comes, there's no doubt that he's scared. He quickens his pace and keeps his eyes steadily on the road. Maybe he should have stayed inside. He could have just gone to get his phone in the morning. Why does he always feel the need to be a rebellious idiot? That was a footstep. Yep, that was definitely a freaking footstep landing a few meters behind him. He knows now that something is there in the forest with him, something that's not a cute little animal. But he won't look back. That's what you should never do. Instead, Jake keeps walking determinedly towards the edge of the woods, with fear rising up inside of him like in a thermostat. The rhythmical footsteps keep closing up on him. It seems like no matter how fast he walks, the footsteps behind him are set to always walk just a little bit faster. He can't get away from them, and when he starts hearing the wheezing breathing filled with gurgling fluid from the unknown being creeping up on him, panic breaks loose. Jake runs. He runs as fast as anyone of his height and weight can, but he knows in the back of his mind that it won't be enough. The thing behind him keeps the same rhythm to its footsteps, but now moves like a galloping horse inhumanly fast. The rapid and shallow breathing coming down his neck sounds excited, and he can almost hear a little bit of crazed laughter emitting from his pursuer. The trees of the forest fly by quickly, and the outer parts of Jake's vision blurs. He feels the air around him get colder, and the light from the moon getting choked by dark clouds. A hand violently grabs his hood, and his head is thrown forward before he falls heavily to the ground. Jake slowly turns his head as he lies there, helpless. He is met by a lucid pair of big white eyes and the tall body of a man looming over him. The man's hair is disheveled, and under the long, dark coat, his skin is pale and filled with deep cuts. The mere presence of his lacerated soul makes Jake dizzy. Even now, while standing still, the man taps his feet in that same rhythm, and the shaky smile on his face expresses maniacal delight. He bends over slowly and takes Jake's hand. His fingers feels bony and frozen. Then, all of a sudden, an electric feeling bolts through Jake. It's like nothing he's ever felt before. Jake stands up with eyes wide open and feels euphoria flow. Through him, the rhythm seizes him, and while preserving the peace and silence of nature, he and the man dance away through the forest together. Story 3. Is it dangerous? The following stories come from the diary of the late Michael Trey Durstrong. The police found this on his person at the scene of his suicide and dismissed the stories as a result of his insanity. You be the judge. February 17th, 2011. I had to move to this house. It was scaring me too much. I'm not sure if I was safe at my old place. I just hope it can't follow me here. If it can, I don't even want to think about it. The real question is it dangerous? I'm keeping this diary just in case it follows me. If it does, then I'm dead. It all started last week. The first time I saw this thing, I was in my old place walking down the hall to go to the bathroom. I turned the corner to get into the bathroom, and as I flicked on the light, something caught my eye in the mirror. I'm not sure what it was. It was like a swish of black with a bit of white on top, almost like a person walking around in black robes. I dismissed it as a trick of the light. I began to have similar sightings all around my house, but then 2 days ago, I really got a chance to see it. I walked out of the kitchen, and it walked right past me. It had its head turned, so I couldn't see the face, but its head was pale as chalk and bald. It was wearing billowing black robes, and it had its arm tucked over a book. It almost looked like a priest carrying a Bible. That was when I decided to move. I packed all my stuff yesterday and moved into my parents' old farmhouse. Middle of nowhere. I don't think it's going to follow me. I hope it's not going to follow me. February 24th, 2011. No signs of it for a whole week. Things are looking good, possibly good enough to move closer to town. February 25th, 2011. I was wrong, very wrong. It not only showed up today, but it was angry. It attacked me. I was on my way downstairs this morning to make breakfast. I turned when I heard a rustle, and I saw it. It slammed itself into me, and I toppled down the stairs. I thought it would be best to ignore it. When I managed to stand up, it had gone. I'm terrified to sleep. I'm afraid to close my eyes or shut off the light or turn a corner. This is killing me. Good night for now. Diary. February 26th, 2011. I've discovered what it is. I've been doing research online. There is a really old myth about my town. Apparently, a priest was caught running a witchcraft and sorcery cult in the basement of the church back in 1882. The townspeople freaked and burned his house down with him inside it. I researched even harder. Apparently, this house was located on what is now 920 for Jingletown Boulevard. That's my address. I'm so scared right now. I would ask for help, but I'd get locked up in a loony bin. I'm going to attempt to rid myself of this tomorrow, if I make it through the night. February 27th, 2011 today, there was another attack. I was moving through the house, sprinkling holy water and saying prayers. As I reached the study, it dropped down from upstairs and landed on my shoulders, knocking the holy water from my hand. Its face pressed way to close to mine, and it hissed. I could have sworn it said, "Revenge, I'm now scared for my life." I did more research, and the two people who owned my house before I did, in 1932 and 1968, both committed suicide. Am I next? February 28th, 2011, I can hear footsteps and different noises all around my house as I write this. The house is shaking, the lights are flickering, and I can hear what sounds like a fire crackling. The only good news is I figured out how to stop it. It's too late for me, but anyone who reads this can still use it. All you have to do is, that's where the diary cuts out. Every other page is covered in blood, just like the room where Michael was found dead, without a single mark on his own body, not a single cut, scratch, or bruise. It's as if his heart just plain stopped beating. Where all the blood came from is still a mystery. The only thing the police could say was that he committed suicide. They refused to comment on what the autopsy found. The doctor who performed the autopsy committed suicide. A day after he did the autopsy, this diary, as you read, took place in 2011. It is now June 2012. 3 people have since moved into 920 for Jingletown Boulevard. All 3 have committed suicide. The house is scheduled for demolition in 2 weeks, as if it will solve anything. Story 4: The Great Escape. A dim light glowed along the cracks of the door. Where am I? How did I get here? The words did not escape my lips, but lay trapped in my throat, rumbling along my vocal cords and spilling out in a dull moan. Am I to remain trapped here? I outstretched my arms, groping blindly in the darkness, running my hands along the walls, feeling for a way out. I let my hands glide along like sandpaper, sending a flesh-turning sound echoing throughout my prison. Stepping forward from the wall, I immediately walked into a large wooden door and collided with a thud. I stumbled back and falling to the ground, sending the carelessly strewn objects on the floor to the edges of my small confinement. With so much fear resting below the surface of my consciousness, I sat in the dark and contemplated my means for escape. In the silent darkness, thoughts swirled around my head as they began to come together, neatly forming a brilliant plan. My concentration was shattered. A soft sobbing penetrated the walls of my jail, consistent moans of sorrow broken only by brief gasps for breath. The sound broke my heart, but gave me hope of freedom. Help me. I'm trapped in here, and I don't know how I got here. But please help, I called out loudly. Again my words, twisted and contorted as they escaped my lungs, leaving me with a sharp, indecipherable shriek. In frustration, I slammed my fists against the ground, shaking the door on its hinges. The crying on the other side of the door stopped and was replaced with deafening silence. Not so much as a fresh breath broke the air. Standing to my feet, I again groped the air, finding the door again. "This is the only way out," I muttered, and again my voice betrayed thoughts, emanating a long, low moan. Grasping the handle, I shook it violently, threatening to break it from the door itself. A loud scream was heard from the other side, and I immediately let go, falling to the back wall and listening carefully. Within moments a booming roar bellowed from the other side. It sounded hurt and angry. The screaming continued again, and the roar responded once more, growing louder before silencing. Its tone grew softer. Creeping closer to my small room, I listened carefully as each step of this beast drew near. The doorknob began to turn, and I rapidly grasped at the objects littering the floor, throwing them over myself in an attempt to hide. Tearing out with but one eye, the door opened and I glanced up, making certain I remained completely still. I saw the beast that had made such fearsome noises, and it set my skin crawling. The beast was round of head, but had flaps of flesh dangling from the side of its face. Its eyes were small and beady, and it had a beak that protruded from its head only but a short distance. I could see tendrils gripping the handle of the door and wrapping around the side of the doorway as it searched the room with eyes alone. Turning its head, it barked at the whimpering spawn behind it, and soon the crying ceased. Slamming the door shut, once more the beast stomped away, and I was left alone, knowing only the taunting pleasures of the freedom that lay so close, yet so far away. I understood now that I could not alert the young beast, and that if the large one returned, it would tear apart this cell in search of me. I placed my ear against the door and listened intently. I thought I heard crude, beastly whispers, but nothing like the behemoth that nearly found me. It was now or never. If I could make it past the little one, I would be free. I felt a breeze of wind as a window cracked open. I slammed my shoulder into the door once, twice, 3 times, and tore through. The door fell to the side, and the little one shrieked again, alerting the alpha. Quickly I darted around in search of the window, until there at last I saw the beauty of a full moon and my path to salvation. As I made my way for the open window, I was stopped dead in my tracks by a second creature, as small as the other. They both screamed, their long limbs and tendrils flailing wildly in the air. I reached down and grabbed a sharp object, lunging it into the beast's chest before leaping out and escaping into the forest. As the man burst into the room, he saw his son crying on the bed, and the friend who spent the night lying on the floor in a pool of blood with scissors in his chest. "What happened?" he shouted. "I told you there was a monster in my closet." The boy screamed back between sobs. Story 5. Crime scene. I walked up to an old house in shambles. It sits in the middle of a farm in rural Wisconsin. The paint was faded almost entirely off the wood paneling of the 2-story farmhouse. There were tinges of light red where the rain and weather had not wiped it entirely clean from. The face of the wood, the barn over to the side, was blacked and charred as only half of it stood after a fire. The ground was relatively barren, mainly dirt around the house, but a field of grass and weeds grew not far beyond the perimeter. I walked up towards the house and onto the creaky porch. It was a hot, humid day of summer, and I took my sunglasses off as I reached the shade of the porch. I looked down at my watch and saw it was starting to get late, and the sun would be setting soon. 7:45. There were a set of windows each side of the center door. They were covered in dirt and had the look of fragile, antique windows. The door used to be a pale white door, but now only part of the door remained. It was chipped and splintered from force, and was patched with a large piece of plywood. I grabbed the knob and attempted to turn it open, to no avail. It seemed as though someone had locked it. The fact that the lock worked at all amazed me. It only took a small amount of force to ram the door down. The inside of the house was just as depressing. It was completely bare. There wasn't so much as a piece of furniture in the house. There were marks on the wall where pictures were hung, but nothing remained besides the shadow of a previous presence. It was an eerie feeling, realizing how much a part of a family's life this house must have been. Now it lay empty and rotting. I walked through what I could only guess was the living room. I opened a door down to the basement. It was dark and possessed a foul smell. I fiddled through my pocket and grabbed a flashlight. I turned it on and walked down the steps. At the bottom, there was a pull string for a naked bulb hanging from the ceiling. After a quick pull, it glowed and produced a yellow film over the dark basement. There were small tent cards everywhere on the floor, accompanied by chalk lines around red stains. It was a crime scene, and by the looks of it, pretty brutal murders. There were chains on one of the walls with crimson stains around the hand restraints. There was a metal table that started to gather rust in the center of the room with some restraints on it. The wall against the staircase held a workbench with various tools, many of which were stained with blood. There was a bloody bathtub on the far end of the room with meat hanging hooks above it. The concrete floor was red in many places, but it had a strangely beautiful swirling pattern that led to the drain under the table. I walked to the opposite end of the room and saw a sliver of light shining onto the floor. I went to inspect the source and found the cellar door. I walked up the few stairs and unlocked the hinges. I swung the creaky doors open and saw a beautiful sunset. I sat there for a moment, taking in the last bit of sunlight from the orange-pink sky. I walked around the house, and the night began to take shape. My car sat in the driveway alone. I noticed it looked like it was shaking. I cautiously walked closer to it and grabbed the keys from my pocket. I started to hear a muffled cry. I unlocked the trunk and opened it. I jumped at the sight. He shouldn't be awake yet. There was a slender man, tied up with duct tape. He was trying to scream something through the tape that was over his mouth, but only muffled cries escaped. His eyes were filled with true fear as he looked up at me. I curled a malicious grin. I lifted him out of the car and began dragging him towards the house. I dragged him down the stairs and into the basement. I began to restrain him onto the table as he screamed for help. I couldn't help but grin under the surgical mask I wore. His screams were so elegant and beautiful. Once he was strapped in, I grabbed a knife from my tool bench. I walked back over to the man who was crying as I showed him the knife. I rather like the crime scene look the police left here. They should have known the killer always returns to the scene of the crime. Story 6. The Smiling Man in Black. When I was younger, I lived with my father and his mother. I was the only child, a girl at that, and my father was very protective of me. My grandmother, on the other hand, hated me. At first, she would just yell at me and shove me around. When Dad was at work, it escalated quickly after he started working longer hours to make ends meet. I rarely saw my father at that point, for years she did things I can't even bring myself to really think about, not enough to write it. For years I prayed and prayed for release. I prayed and wished for her to die to God to whoever would listen. My dad probably would have believed me if I'd had a chance to talk to him, but she'd made me feel as though I were an abomination over the years that I couldn't bear it anymore. After she killed my kitten and made me bury it, at the age of 13, I attempted suicide by hanging myself inside my closet. Apparently, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing and the bar in the closet. And I tied myself to fell on my head and knocked me the fuck out. I pulled myself up and headed to sneak into the bathroom without the monster cut to catch me and give me another beating. As I left my bedroom, I caught a whiff of something very fucking rancid, like vomit, burning flesh, and blood, mixed together warm. I knew all these smells fairly well, considering what my grandmother did to me, and I thought for a moment it might have been my imagination, or her making something disgusting from meat to eat to torture me more. While I recognized the separate smells in a way I'd never smelled something like this, as I got closer and closer to the stairs, overlooking the living room, which was right across from the bathroom, I started to hear something. Faintly, I remember hearing it a few feet back, but suddenly it seemed so much louder. My head was pounding, my heart was pounding, and all I could hear was gurgle, smack, smack, squish, squish, ree-up. The mere idea of peeking over the stairs and into the living room was suddenly so profoundly frightening that I almost just went back into my bedroom. But strangely enough, it was amazingly easy to just do it anyway. What I saw in the living room will never leave me for as long as I live. In more than one sense, my grandmother was lying on the ground. There was someone wearing black kneeling over her. They were both covered in blood. The person's head was moving rhythmically over its hands, which held what I realized was some organ in her body. The person didn't look up, and I was scared silent. There was so much blood, so much blood. The sound of gnawing, the smacking mouth, the snapping of her organs that they were ripped from my grandmother's body, what was left of it. The brutally grotesque sight of her chest cavity having been torn open, of her body being consumed little by little, filled me with terror I had never known before. I didn't know what to do. It ate her body slowly, seeming to enjoy every bite it took, its body swaying and moving so unnaturally that I couldn't even think it was human. I couldn't stop watching. I couldn't run away. The sheer terror of it choked the scream I would have let out. It stopped. I stopped. It looked up at me after what seemed an eternity, releasing the contents of its mouth. Gory pieces and blood, some brown at that point, covered most of its face. What I could see of the face, it seemed to be male, very pale in patches. Where eyes were supposed to be were black pits that seemed to dilate, expand, and retract. He had no lips, but his mouth twitched, like some kind of hologram going in and out, slowly smiling, the smile expanding beyond normal human ability. I vomited and fainted. I woke up. My father was home and worrying over me. My grandmother's body was gone along with all of the blood. "Where's Grandma? Where is she?" I kept asking him until I had to stop. From the look in his eyes, he told me her heart was bad and she was in heaven now. I couldn't believe it. That wasn't possible, right? Did I imagine that whole thing? At her funeral, on the way to her burial site, I saw the man again. He looked more human, but I knew it was him. I remembered that smile. That day I smiled back. I still have dreams about that man. Sometimes I think I see him in public. Even when I don't see him, I can feel him there. He's always there. watching me. Story 7. Don't think of the old hag. It has been 6 weeks since my first sighting of the wicked old hag. I woke up in the middle of the night and went to roll over, but my entire body was paralyzed. I lay there, scared and helpless, contemplating my predicament when I became aware of a presence in the room with me, a presence that I can only describe as pure evil. I caught sight of a withered old woman at the foot of the bed. Her tall, hunched frame was draped in a long, dirty gown, and wisps of filthy white hair hung from a balding scalp. I channeled all my energy into a desperate attempt to move, but my efforts were in vain. It felt as though I was being pinned to the bed by an invisible force. I tried to scream out for help, but my words came out as jumbled whimpers. I could feel her claw-like hands on my legs and my arms as she crawled her way up my rigid body. A crooked smile revealed rotten teeth, and her bloodshot eyes were callous and calculating as she stared directly at me. Suddenly, I bolted upright in bed. I could move again, and the room around me was empty. It was just a bad dream, I concluded. I took a few minutes to catch my breath and settled back to sleep. A couple of weeks later, I met an old friend for a drink, and a point in our conversation reminded me of my dream. I had a scary case of sleep paralysis a couple of weeks ago. I told him, "Really, did you see the old hag?" My friend replied, an icy chill ran over my body. I hadn't told anyone about the dream, and there was no way he could have known what I'd seen. "How the hell did you know that?" I asked with disbelief, my voice quivering. "I read about it some time ago," he explained, startled by my reaction. "A phenomenon known as old hag syndrome, where sufferers of sleep paralysis are visited by an entity, often in the form of an old hag." "You're bullshitting me," I said, incredulously. He convinced me to look it up, and so when I returned home, I typed the keywords old hag and sleep paralysis into Google. It returned pages full of results, some of which told of ancient folklore spanning different cultures. Others told of personal experiences like my own. To some, the entity took the form of an old lady or a witch. To others, she looked more like a demon, but they all described the presence of overwhelming evil. Most chilling of all were the accounts in which the hag tortured and molested her victims as they lay paralyzed and helpless. I turned off the computer and tried to put it out of my mind. An eerie mood lingered in the room, and I had a bad feeling that unless I could get her out of my mind, she was sure to pay me another visit. That night I was woken by a piercing cackle, and I lay paralyzed as that tall and stooped figure emerged at the foot of my bed. She crawled under the covers and up my body before sitting on my chest and peering down at me. She ran her slimy tongue over her chapped lips and made slurping sounds. What transpired after that I cannot bring myself to talk about. I spent subsequent days browsing forums for answers, for a way out. I am neither religious nor superstitious, and I don't believe anything considered supernatural, but scientific resources offer no rational explanation for what I've been experiencing. Just speculation and skepticism. In some cultures it is believed to be a demonic curse, and the entity is brought to life through the power of suggestion. Most victims recall some kind of trigger that worked its way into their subconscious, such as a painting or a friend sharing their personal experience. I've been telling myself, don't think of the old hag. But as we all know, the harder you try not to think of something, the more that thought persists. The visions grow more vivid and traumatizing the more I think of her. Some nights she violates me in unspeakable ways, and I wake with bruises, scratches, and bite marks over my body. Other nights I hear her ragged breathing in my ear and find her lying next to me, grinning and gurgling. But I think I've learned a way to be rid of these visions once and for all. I must plant the thought into the mind of someone else and distract the old hag with a fresh victim, as selfish and cruel as I am to pass this curse on to someone else. I just can't bear it any more. Dear reader, whoever you are, please forgive me. Bonus Stories, Story 1. The Unopenable Wooden Box. It seemed like just an ordinary box. The wood was old and weathered. The fastenings were heavy brass, and the lid was inlaid with an ornate silver symbol. My father willed it to me after the state executed him for murder. He left no explanation or instructions, only the small, mysterious wooden box. At first I considered tossing it into the river. The last thing I wanted was a reminder of the man that had abandoned his son in favor of a life of violence. But being the weak-willed person that I am, my curiosity soon overwhelmed me, and I could stand the mystery of the box no longer. Opening the box, however, was easier said than done. Attempts to pry open the latches with my hands yielded only abraded fingers and broken nails. Screwdrivers were snapped, hammers were shattered, and drill motors were burnt out. Yet the contents of the box remained out of reach, encased in a wooden tomb determined not to yield its secrets. Eventually I gave up, doing what I've always done when I can't get what I want. I told myself that whatever was inside was not worth the effort, and did my best to forget about it. But the box would not allow me to forget so easily, and one night while I was sleeping, it opened of its own accord. I awoke to an eerie silver luminescence that filled my bedroom, and a deep sense of pervasive cold that chilled the surroundings to absolute stillness. As I sat up in my bed, I was overwhelmed by a sense of unfamiliarity, as if I had been transported somewhere that looked very much like my bedroom, but was home to someone for something else. The silver light was emanating from beneath my closet door, lending a sense of unreality to everything that bathed in its pallid sheen, casting odd shadows that seemed to creep and move in the corner of my eye. I could feel myself standing up, though I had not willed myself to do so, and slowly, quietly, I crept towards the closet. My fingertips brushed the knob, recoiling for a moment from the penetrating cold. Then resolutely, firmly I grasped it, pulling the door open to reveal the box. The hinges had sprung open wide. The light spilling forth was piercing and intense. My eyes filled up with the light and felt as if they would soon burst. Yet I could not tear them away. I could feel myself falling slowly forward into an abyss of silver light that enveloped my horizon and became my entire being. Just before it swallowed me, the box snapped shut, and I found myself on the floor, my sweat-drenched cheek pressed tight against the cold rough wood of the box. I pushed myself back to my feet. The eerie silver light was gone, and my room seemed once again my own. Yet something was still not right. The cheek that had touched the box was throbbing with a burning pain. I wandered into the bathroom and flipped on the light, gasping at my grotesque reflection. The symbol on top of the box was burned into my cheek. I reached up to touch it, but as I did so it faded, But the bran was not the only souvenir the box has left me with. I can feel a presence in me, an unwelcome guest inside my mind. I find myself missing time, awaking in strange locales with blood splattered on my clothing. But that is not what worries me the most. What worries me the most is the call I received from my lawyer yesterday asking for clarification on the amendment I had made to my will. He wondered why the only thing I wanted to leave my son when I died was an unopenable wooden box. Story 2. The Puppet Master's Prayer. It was my senior year at St. Mary's University, a small Catholic school in Texas. I grew up in San Diego, California, and moving to such a foreign place, I didn't ever get along with anyone. Even by my senior year, I was studying to be a theologist, and all my classes were fairly small, filled with about 20 to 40 students. My hardest class, religious studies, was held in an ancient Spanish chapel. It was huge. The ceiling went up about 80 feet. The pews started up pretty high and eventually ended right in front of the podium. There were crucifixes and saints hanging towards the corners of the ceilings, and their sad eyes stared down at us. The prettiest part of the church were the glass-stained windows that brought color into the room and could even illuminate their pale faces. It was my least favorite class. I ended up staying up at all hours of the night studying for it, and on that Tuesday morning, the day before our final exam, I woke up 20 minutes late and had to practically run to the chapel. When I walked in through the huge wooden doors, the lights were shut off and the source of light was coming through the stained glass windows and the overhead projector. No one turned around as I expected them to. Not even my professor, who usually started lecturing right as class started and got on to his students for being late. I ignored it, thinking I probably just got lucky. After taking my seat in the front row, I started writing down the notes on the projector and finished fairly quickly. I patiently sat, waiting for my professor to change the slide or something, but he just stood there, back against us, facing the screen. Professor Tomas, with no response. After a few seconds, I tried again. Professor Tomas, I said a little louder, can you change the slide? Still, he didn't answer me, and that's when I started to suspect something was wrong. I leaned over to try to see his face, but it was too bright against the projector to make out his features. How could he stare at that illuminate projector without being blinded? I sat back straight in my seat and started to stand to leave class since we obviously weren't doing anything. That's when I noticed shiny reflections portraying from his back. But after staring at it for a little while, it wasn't just on his back. I followed the strings of light up to the tall ceilings, but a dark shadow on the dark ceiling ended their paths. At that point, I knew something wasn't right. I turned around to find all my peers staring down at their papers in the exact same position they were in as when I first walked in, with the same strings starting from their backs and making its way up the ceiling. I walked over to some guy sitting close to me, some smart ass that always knew the right answers, and gave him a little shove. Hey, I said, and as soon as I touched him, he fell over, as if he were asleep. I looked up to the rest of the class, feeling a chill go down my back. I grabbed my bag and ran back to the door, frantically pushing and pulling at the handles to get out as far away as possible. But they were locked. Then I heard a whisper from behind me. Cor lesu and semel minima dying, amen misrari. I recognized this from one of my Bible classes. It was a Catholic prayer, only said in Latin. Slowly, I turned around. 30 empty sockets were staring back at me, whispering, their lips moving by two thin strings. The prayer for the dying echoed off the walls. Story 3. Zaspis. A few months ago, I'd been browsing Tumblr for interesting things. That was the day I found Zaspis. Zaspis had a normal-looking blog at first glance. Typical vintage pictures, images of celebrities, food, etc. I followed her for some movie gifs. But then, just last week, she posted some text under a Read More label and tagged personal. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the text post. Story for the girl in white. I was always a quiet child. I preferred playing alone outside to being around people. My dad thought it was because I was socially undeveloped. My mom was convinced I was just more creative than my peers and too smart to relate to them. I would go off to the woods or anywhere outside and make up adventures or create stories for my life. I made up a dozen or so imaginary friends to join me on these adventures. My mom never questioned me about them, and in fact encouraged this behavior. One friend was the favorite, but I never got around to naming her. I named all the others and created backgrounds for them. She was just her. She told me things about people I had no way of knowing. Even subconsciously, she was the one that never went away. She was a pale girl that always appeared to have just recovered from an illness. I guess I liked her best because she was quiet like me and watched people when we walked in stores or down streets. She would whisper in my ear and tell me about the people we saw. He's on his way to kill himself. She's stealing those cookies. Don't look at him. Trust me, you won't like what he wants. I would quietly listen. I never seemed to have to talk to her for her to know what I was going to say. All the other friends faded away, and I started school. She stayed up until middle school, constantly telling me each person's terrible secret. I found out who was abused, who was in love with whom, and who cheated on what test and when. I began writing everything she said in a small journal. I was still a loner, and my mom became more and more concerned that she was still around, and I rarely made friends. If I began to grow close to someone, she would tell me more and more about him or her until I couldn't stand the person. Freshman year, I finally snapped and told her to leave and consciously ignored her. She followed me for a few months, but either I had destroyed her or she had left. I still seemed to have a sixth sense about people, but no girl telling me private secrets. Without her distracting me, I was able to make a close friend in high school. I never told my friend, Amy, about her because I was already strange enough. I knew if Amy called crying that she was going to call and why she was upset before she even dialed the phone. Amy liked this and relied on me for comfort and for warnings about bad boyfriends or friends. I was more than happy to warn this girl whom I loved. I liked to think I was protecting her. My senior year, my Amy became annoyed with me. If she tried to befriend anyone else, they said I started telling her too many of the person's secrets that I had no business knowing or sharing. I just thought she should know that these were bad people. I was the only good person. I was the person for her to be friends with. Even when she openly avoided me, I was always watching. I slipped her notes about a guy she had a crush on being an abuser, or that her new friend was pregnant. After a while, I started to waste away and always looked a little ill. I moved near Amy and was always near her. I began to look younger because I was so frail. Years later, I met a young girl in the woods outside Amy's house. She said she had no friends and liked being alone. Me too, I sighed. And tell your mom her new boyfriend is cheating on her. Story 5, Mirror Image. I don't want to move away. The words hang in the air between them, like dust, slow and stuffy. I don't want you to move away either, says Toby. They're both sitting cross-legged on the hardwood floor of his bedroom, facing each other. Matthew pokes at a small bug crawling across the floor. So does Toby. You could leave, too. Matthew says, you know I can't. Toby replies. Matthew does know, but he likes to think it might happen. Somehow, the thought of being torn away from his best friend hurts him, especially because someone like him doesn't often earn the title of best friend. Ever since he's known Toby, they've been practically identical, which, in Matthew's opinion, is really great because it's pretty much like having a twin brother. He's never had a twin, let alone a brother, and while he thinks he has some cousins on his mom's side, they're all grown-ups and they live far away. He doesn't know if his dad has any family his age. He likes Toby because Toby never thinks he's weird or messed up for the things he says. Toby doesn't whisper about him like his classmates do, or yell at him like his teachers do, or scribble notes onto a little yellow notepad like Ms. Stacy does every Thursday at 4 o'clock after school. The best part is that Toby doesn't sigh. His mom seems to do nothing but sigh at the news, sigh at the grocery bill, sigh at his report card, sigh, until he's sure she must be nothing more than a big mouth of never-ending sighs, like a draft from an open window. Toby listens to him and understands he cares, even when all Matthew is saying is rants about his classmates and bad grades, rants about getting picked on or not being invited to so-and-so's birthday party. Toby sits patiently and listens. Dad says I'll meet new friends. Toby frowns his answer. Yeah, but I won't. I'll just have to live with the fact that whoever else moves in here could be old and cranky. You don't know that. It could be someone our age, a kid. They could be nice. I doubt it. Even if a kid moves in, they won't be like you. It wouldn't be the same. Matthew doesn't reply. He picks at the torn hole on his jeans. I know I'm the reason your mom wants to move. Toby speaks up. Don't keep blaming yourself for it. Okay. No, it's fine. I know she's scared of me. That's why you're not supposed to talk to me. But I'm always here whether she likes it or not. Matthew laughs at the thought of his mother fearing his best friend, but he doesn't disagree. Story 6, Greed. Right now, there is a thin man in a skin-tight black suit sitting in your closet, his bony knees bent to his chest, his spidery white fingers wrapped around his ankles. He sits there and has been sitting there since you began reading this. His name is Greed. Can you hear his breathing yet, now that you are aware of his existence? If you open your closet door, you will see him sitting there. Immediately his expressionless face will smile, and his sharp green eyes will lock onto yours. You may open and close the closet as much as you wish, and you may leave him there for as long as you like, but he will never go away, and every time you look inside your closet, he will still be there, his glassy eyes following yours. Only you will see him. Don't attempt to tell anyone else. They will only question your sanity. If you ignore greed, gradually he will take over your existence. When you look in the mirror, you will see him standing behind you, smiling his eerie smile. You will see him sitting in the back of your car as you drive home late from work, as you turn the lights off downstairs and you run up the steps to the safety of your bedroom. He will be running behind you. Even if you do not turn to look, you will hear a second pair of footsteps. There is only one way to rid yourself of greed. At exactly midnight of any night of the year apart from Christmas Eve, sit in front of your closet with a razor in your left hand. You must be alone, the lights must be off, and you must place a lit tea candle in between you and the closet door. Without opening the door, repeat this verse: "In return for my sanity, I give to you my soul. Use it as you wish, but please leave me alone." The closet door will swing open, revealing greed, whose eyes are already glaring you in the face. He will hold out his long, bony hand. Hold your right hand over it, and with your left, make a clean cut across your wrist and let your blood fill his hand. Once it is full, he will retreat it and place your gift in his top right coat pocket. Then he will stand up and walk out of your house, the doors opening themselves for him. He will never return. From that moment on, your life will be perfect. You will effortlessly become rich beyond belief. You will find and marry the love of your life and achieve anything your heart desires. You will never become sick, and you will die warm and comfortable in your bed, surrounded by those you love. But once your eyes have finally closed and your lungs stop breathing, you will meet greed again. He will take you to visit your loved ones who you have left behind, and you will watch helplessly as he plays his game. He will take the sharpest knife from their kitchen and hide in their closet. Next time they open it, he will slaughter and devour them. He will repeat this little ritual until everyone you've ever loved is lying dead in a puddle of their own blood. After he has finally finished this twisted game, he will take your soul from his top right coat pocket and swallow it. You will become a part of him and be a part of his game forevermore. However, if you take the option to ignore him, he will never leave, and every once in a while, if you turn over in the direction of your partner in bed, instead of seeing their beautiful face, your eyes will meet with his, and that evil grin will still be stretched over his rows of sharp teeth. Story 7. Ground Control to Major Tom. Did you take your protein pills? Good. Now put your helmet on. Ground Control commanded, and Major Tom obeyed. Ground Control droned on as Tom sat in his seat in his cramped capsule and waited. Commencing countdown. Engines are active. Tom counted down with the man on the microphone as he felt the rush of anxiety flow through his veins. 10, 9, 8. Tom checked the ignition and heard one final phrase from ground control. "May God's love be with you." Liftoff. That's all Tom remembered. He woke up to a deep black outside of his spaceship windows and an eruption of cheers from his headset. Good work, Tom. You've really made the grade. Just exit your capsule and pilot the ship. Tom obeyed and exited his capsule and floated in a most peculiar way to the pilot's seat. Floating through space 100,000 miles from Earth was the spaceship of Major Tom. It had been 3 months since the launch, and the only company Tom had was the reiteration of pre-launch instructions in his head over and over. He looked out his window to observe the moon and stare out to the lonesome, lifeless abyss That was deep space. The stars looked very different, Tom thought. More vivid, bigger, even. Tom's view was distracted by a sudden movement. Something had swiftly darted behind the moon. Something quite massive had hidden itself behind the moon, perhaps an asteroid, Tom thought, but they don't move that quick. Out from behind the moon jetted that looked like a piece of space itself. It was something very large, black as the night sky and dotted in large glowing lights, and it was coming right for Tom's ship. Thinking quickly, he reversed the thrusters on his ship. The massive space thing had narrowly missed the ship, but had enough momentum to spin the ship rapidly. Tom was thrown into the ship's walls. The familiar voice of ground control buzzed in Tom's ear. "Tom, the ship has received damage all over the hull. What happened?" Tom could only reply, "Tell my wife I love her very much." A different voice from ground control echoed, "She knows." The space thing was coming back for a head-on collision with Tom's ship. All Tom could do was get into his space suit and wait. As the space thing got closer and closer, Tom could see how large it really was. It was snake-like and had to be at least a mile long and hundreds of feet wide. As it came within miles of Tom's ship, it slowed. Eventually it had stopped and just sat there staring at seams. Then it began to coil itself around Tom's ship. Metal groaned from the pressure and glass cracked. Tom looked outside his window at the beast. It was just like space itself was tangling itself up around him. Machinery began to beep and lights started to die. Tom frantically checked everything he could. The energy was slowly being sucked away. It didn't take long, perhaps a few minutes, for the ship to be rendered completely powerless. Then nothing, no more metal groaning, and no more glass cracking. Tom was stuck floating around in a powerless ship, and he could do nothing about it. Ground control had buzzed in his ear one last time. "Major Tom, your circuit is dead." "Something is wrong." Tom didn't reply. "Can you hear me, Major Tom?" Tom still didn't reply. "Tom, can you hear me, Major Tom?" Tom turned off his only contact to human life. He turned off his life support systems and stared out his window. He saw a floating bit of space going towards a blue planet. With his last breath, Tom sang quietly, "Here I am floating in a tin can, far above the moon. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do."